Okay, boys and girls, so thank you to Gabriella and Nathan for reminding us of that wonderful verse about how we're not to worry and instead we can pray and we can thank God and we can tell Him of the things that are on our hearts. So, as I said at the start, we're going to be thinking about something new this week, and we've got a reminder about God's promises and a Bible verse that tells us that God keeps His promises. And I've got two of our bigger truths, because they fit in with what we're going to be reading about from this book today. It's called The Promises of God Storybook Bible. And there's a little bit right at the very beginning that reminds us of wonderful truths about God. So we're just going to listen to those first, and then we're going to have a little clip to help us think about what we're learning about this week. Okay, so the very first thing that this book tells us is that God is the God who always keeps His promises. So have a wee listen. It says here, God before light. Now we can't imagine what it would be like if it was always dark. But before there was even light, God was there. So have a wee listen. This is really, really cool. Did you know that God existed before there was even any light anywhere? God has always existed. And sometimes us grown-ups forget to tell you children some of the important things about God, because we sometimes think the big truths are just too big. But you know what? You're also clever, and we know that you can deal with the big truths. You can handle them, you can learn them, and you can love them too. Okay, so here are some important things about God that we need to know right from the very beginning. God has always been around. He is only one God, but He has three persons that are all completely God. And sure, we know that already, because we learned that in Big Questions, Bigger Truths. Now, there are some things that you're not able to do because you're still children, and that's okay. You're not able to drive. You're not able maybe to reach up high in your kitchen cupboards to get where all the goodies are. There are things that you can't do yet, but there are things that you can know about God, even whenever you're still young. Okay, the first thing that you need to know about God is that He's always been there. There was never a time that God wasn't there. He was around before anything was created. He has always been the same, and He has always been there. He never changes. The second thing that you need to know is that there is only one God. Now, most of the time we just call Him God because we're talking about all of God and all of who He is. And then we get into the part where there are three persons in God. And sometimes we talk about God the Father, sometimes God the Son, and sometimes God the Holy Spirit. And we know that God the Son is Jesus, and we learned that the Holy Spirit is the power of God. Okay, now, keep your ears open, because there's one more thing I'm going to tell you. God has always known every single thing that was going to happen, and nothing ever happens without His permission. That means when we hear about something that's happened in the Bible, maybe we read a story about someone in the Bible who's made a mistake or didn't obey God, and maybe it seems like whenever we learned about how Jesus was killed on the cross, maybe it seems that God's plan wasn't working out the way it should have done. But boys and girls, the truth that you need to know is that God knows everything that is going to happen. And everything that happens is part of God's plan. And you know what? That's really, really great news. And we can come to this God who knows everything, who has made everything, who has always been there, who will always be there and never ever change, and who is in charge of everything, and we can trust Him because He always keeps His promises. Now, what we're thinking about this morning is that God is the creator of everyone and everything. And we're going to go right back to the very beginning of the Bible, and we're going to think about the story of creation, and we're going to find a promise of God in the story of creation. And then we're going to think about how that promise is great news for us today. So we've got a wee video clip coming up now about the story of creation, and then we'll come back to our book afterwards.